Years after the Sibbett killing, we've brought a man back to Newcastle who claims to have been involved in the murder. His name is John Tumblety, alias Scotch Johnny, a 34-year-old thief. While in prison 5 years ago, Scotch Johnny told an astonishing story, one which was not believed at the time. He admitted to picking up the London killer from South Hetton after the murder and swore that Stafford and Lavaglio were innocent of the crime. His story needed checking out. In a Newcastle hotel room, we set him down with coffee and cigarettes. It was to be a long interview, in the course of which he constantly mentioned one man whose name we've had to cut out. At what time, Mr. Tumblety, did you go to the Birdcage Club on the night of January the 4th?
Well, it was after the bars closed, you know, between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, somewhere around about that time.
And who was in the club that night?
Well, there was a number of faces that I knew. On reflection, it's not very easy to remember all of them. Of course, Stafford and Lavaglio were there. There's a number of other people, a young fella I knew quite well. And there was a Cockney chap with him who had been around for a few days. Of course, being a strange face, and the company he was keeping. You know, it was easy to see he was a stranger, you know, sort of thing.
You got a phone call, I believe. At what time was this?
The nearest I can place it, now I've thought a lot about this, the nearest I can place that telephone call would be about between 12 and 1 o'clock. I can't put it any nearer than that.
Who was it from?
Well, it was from this Cockney chap. I know by his voice it was from, you know, it was him. I had spoken to him, incidentally.
Mr. Tumblety, he knew who you were. Do you say that you didn't know who he was? And you recognized his voice?
I recognized his voice. He was a Cockney, and he had a distinctive voice, and such that I recognized it immediately.
What did he ask you to do?
Well, he asked me to go out and pick him up. He was stuck out near South Hetton. He says, "Do you know the road?" I says, "Yes." He says, "Can you come out for me? Can you get transport?" I says, "Yeah, I'm sure I can." And he says, "Okay then." He says, "How soon can you get out there?" I said, "I'll leave right away." He says, "All right, I'll walk towards Newcastle." I says, "You know the road all right?" He says, "Yeah." I says, "Okay, you walk towards Newcastle and I'll keep my eye on for you. I'll be there as quickly as I can."
We asked John Tumblety to repeat the drive he made 6 years ago.
There you are. There's the spot. Where? See where that sign is on the other side of the road? On the other side of the road?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's it. Just there.
So what did you do? Did you slow up?
I slowed up about here.
Yes.
It was just about then that he, more or less, you know, stopped walking. And just right here, that's it.
Tumblety had led us to a spot a mile away from Pestpool Bridge, which is where Sibbett's body was found. Did he come to you, or did you go to him?
He was walking along here. He was walking in this direction. I just turned the car around here, straight on. He crossed the road, got into the car, I turned the car around and straight on.
There was a tear and a cut on his leg. This was the inside of his, around about the calf, running down at an angle towards his...
This is his left leg?
On his left leg, yes. And his trouser leg was soaked in blood, and so was his sock and his shoe, you know. And I didn't ask him what had happened.
What did he say to you?
About this cut?
About anything? He must have said something to you.
The only thing he said was, "Turn the car on, get back to Newcastle. I want to go to the club. Will you take me to the club?" I says, "Yes." And he says, "It's still there?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Okay then, take me back to the club." So I turned the car around and headed back to Newcastle.
Have you got any corroboration for your story? Did anyone see you when you came back to the Birdcage with this London man?
Oh, plenty of people saw me, but nobody seems to want to know about it.
Which people?
Well, the doorman saw me.
Mrs. Matthew Dean?
Yes, Matthew Dean, yeah.
John Tumblety didn't know that we'd already traced Matthew Dean to a Newcastle restaurant where he was now working as a waiter. We confronted Dean with Tumblety, and after we'd talked for a while, persuaded Dean to repeat what he'd said in front of camera. Mr. Dean, do you remember this man?
I can remember him in the club, yes.
This was on the night of January the 4th, 1967?
Yes.
What do you know about him?
Well, I don't know anything about him personally, you know, just as a customer, you know.
What did he do on that night?
Well, I just came into the club, and Later on, he had a telephone, and he came up to me and said, you know, is it all right if I go out? I said, yes. He said, well, can I get back in when I come, you know, come back? I'll only be about half an hour to an hour. I said, yes, sir. About an hour later, he came in with a guest, signed the book, and went straight into the club.
What did this man have to say to when he met him in the club?
They were in a heated argument at the time, and there was voices raised, and I did hear expressions such as, you know, you're mad, you bastard, you know.
Who was saying that?
This was saying to this Cockney chap, you know, says, you're mad, you bastard. What's to that effect, you know?
And what was the Cockney man saying?
He says, you shouldn't have left me, you shouldn't have left me. You know, something to that effect, anyway.
Did you know by this time that Sibbett had been murdered?
I didn't know. I had no idea at all.
Did anyone talk to you about the murder?
Well, I had a meeting with a few days later, and it all became clear then. Told me initially, he says, I've had to okay you. You know that, do you? I says, how do you mean? He says, because you went out to pick him up. He says, you'd best forget about it. I says, well, I've already forgotten about it. He says, I didn't prompt him to say what happened or anything, but he seemed worried, concerned. We had a few drinks together. It was in a pub called the Greyhound, not far from where we lived.
So what you're saying is this, that a man was brought up from London to frighten Angus Sibbett. He was driven out to Southampton by that things went wrong and Sibbett was killed.
That's exactly what he told me. That they had a meeting with Sibbett that night, and that things had gone wrong, completely wrong, and that the chap that was with him, he just says he went stark raving mad and started shooting at the bastard, you know. He says, and that's it. He says, I got the hell out of it.
We also talked to the man whom we're not allowed to name, the man who, according to Tumblety, drove the E-Type. You did know Tumblety, though?
I did, yes.
You were in the birdcage on the night of January the 4th, 1967.
Yes.
Did you see John Tumblety?
Not that I can recollect.
What were you doing at the time? What was your line of business?
Thieving.
Have you ever frightened anyone for money? Have you done a job like that?
I've done a job, but it wasn't for money, it was for a friend.
You just did it for a friend, did
Yes.
you? What did you do?
Well, I drove a car in.
You drove a car at the man who needed to be frightened?
Yes, there was three of us.
What do you think happened?
Well, 100 things could have happened.
But you would know what was more likely to happen. There aren't 100 possibilities, I fancy, in your mind.
Why, he could have been killed with somebody out of town, with somebody in the town that knew the way around.
Now, this fits in with Mr. Tumblety's statement. Apart from the fact that he points the finger at you,
Yeah.
do you think the statement makes sense?
Yes, it makes sense, but I wasn't the one that drove the car.
He was plainly nervous about talking to us. At one point, he asked us a question. If Stafford and Lavaglia were released from prison, could somebody else be prosecuted for the Sibbett murder? John Tumblety was much more relaxed in his interview. But there was one question he was not prepared for. That was when we asked him about his gun collection.
Well, it was during the year 1966. I built up quite a collection of guns. I'm not prepared to say how, but I had several guns, and these I was selling, or, you know, for various reasons I had these guns.
Were you lending them to people to do jobs?
Well, this is more or less, yeah.
You see, I've got here a statement from Andrew Johnson, who's a former business colleague of yours, who was imprisoned for his part in the Chinese robbery, the robbery that you did. This is what he says. During early February 1967, I called with some friends at Tumblety's house, which was then 47 Victoria Street, Newcastle upon Tyne 4. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
Whilst in the house, he took me to a bedroom in the house and told me that he had supplied the gun which had been used to murder Sibbett.
This was in February.
February 1967. This is before you pulled the job together that got you into prison.
Well, it could well have been one of the guns that I had in the collection, because they were just handed around from one person to another, and I got rid of the rest of them. It may well have been that one of the guns I had was used in the murder. I have no idea.
Do you remember telling Mr. Johnson this?
No, I don't.
Do you deny it?
Of course I didn't. I didn't tell him this.
Doesn't this explain, though, why you went out to South Hetton to pick up this Cockney gentleman? In fact, you had to go to pick him up. You had given him the gun which he had used to kill Sibbett.
Well, if that was the case, I'd hardly be telling you that I went out and picked him up, would I?
But it may well have been the gun that was used to kill Sibbett.
I have no idea. Well, it could have 7.65 millimeter. I mean, it covers a wide range of guns, doesn't it? Not necessarily a Walther or any other gun for that matter. It could fall into a number of categories. It's certainly, it means nothing to me.
But if we wanted to find that gun, we'd have to dredge the River Tyne, is that right?
Yeah, there must be 10 feet of mud over it now. This was 5-6 years ago.